Fire 4. The order hit the control room like a slap. 4 torpedoes at once, not just audacious, illegal. The crew froze. The manual said 2, at most. The sea gave only one true chance. Commander Richard O'Kane loomed over the plotting table, eyes fixed on the glowing trace of a Japanese cruiser crossing their sights. Millions in armor and pride sliding through the South China Sea under a flawless moon. "Captain," whispered Ensign Brown, "that's against protocol." "I know," O'Kane's voice was steady. "That's why it'll work." Silence. Then the hiss of compressed air in Tang's forward torpedo room. 1, 2, 3, 4. The boat shuddered as the tubes fired in sequence. Ahead, 4 silver streaks sprinted into the dark. On sonar, the seconds stretched into an eternity. Ping, ping, ping. While the range closed, and men mouthed numbers instead of prayers. 2,000. 1,600. 1,200. Then the first detonation rattled the boat. A second, louder. The third tore through steel and water like underwater thunder. They heard the death of a warship before they could see it. The Japanese cruiser split in 2. Boilers screamed as the hull gave way. Laughter bubbled up in the control room. "We did it! We hit all 3. O'Kane didn't laugh. He kept studying the chart. His pencil lay motionless. "Captain?" the helmsman asked. O'Kane looked up. There were 4. The laughter died. A moment later, the sonar operator went pale. "Sir, there's another contact bearing 350. It's closing fast." O'Kane whispered, "Almost on our tail. That's one of ours." In the next 40 seconds, the crew of USS Tang would learn the harshest lesson of war. The most dangerous enemy is often the one you've made yourself. The Imperial Japanese Navy had built doctrine on predictability. Submarines as cautious, patterned machines. American skippers were expected to fire from distance, launch 2 torpedoes, and fade like ghosts. But Richard O'Kane read the same manuals and threw much of them away. "Rules keep you alive," he told his men, "until they make you slow." He believed victory favored nerve and timing over timid caution. Tang proved it. In less than a year, she became the most lethal sub in the Pacific, credited with sinking dozens of enemy ships. O'Kane's tactics violated every regulation. Close-range shots, night surface attacks under searchlights, torpedo spreads so tight the Navy called them suicidal. Yet they worked. The math the enemy expected didn't add up against a commander who trusted angles and audacity more than doctrine. By October 1944, Japan's surface fleet was fractured, skulking under the cover of darkness. One target that night was a Takao-class heavy cruiser. 15,000 tons of guns and steel, escorted by 2 destroyers, a prize beyond imagining. When sonar caught its propeller signature, O'Kane's crew felt the mix of money, glory, and peril. The manual said, "Fire to check bearings, wait for confirmation." O'Kane calculated turn, current, echo, delay. His hands were steady. His jaw was not. "If we miss now, we don't get a second try," he murmured. "Sir, your orders?" someone asked. The seconds bled away until the command fell. "Fire 4." The room froze. The words were heresy. 4 torpedoes meant 4 chances for failure. Interference, overlap, gyro faults, 1 misangled degree that could make a torpedo circle back. The math was brutal. One man's resolve against the law of averages. But O'Kane wasn't thinking about law. He was thinking about distance. 20 to 200 yards and closing. "If I die for breaking orders," he had told them before. Remember, it wasn't pride. It was precision. The misconception was mutual. The Japanese assumed Americans wouldn't dare. The Americans assumed ordnance obeyed rules. Both were wrong. At 46 knots, physics doesn't ask permission. The fourth torpedo left the tube, and for a few suspended seconds, the ocean forgot the difference between bravery and mistake. By the autumn of 1944, the Pacific had become a graveyard of hulls, half-submerged wrecks, shattered masts, oil shimmering in moonlight. The statistics were stark. Thousands of Japanese ships sunk, millions of tons of steel erased, and many U.S. submarines lost attempting the same work. Tang, SS-306, a Balo-class boat of 300 Lund feet, 8 forward tubes and 24 E-McKee-18 electric torpedoes, had become both feared and envied. Her captain was short, calm, polite, an engineer by habit, a gambler by trade. He measured war in degrees, not feelings. A man who'd learned under Morton on Wahoo that surprise, not stealth, was a submarine's deadliest tool. When O'Kane took Tang's con, he applied that brutal lesson with mechanical precision. Close to under 1,000 yards, attack on the surface at night, and if detected, charge the target rather than melting away. The Navy fumed. Warnings arrived. O'Kane replied with polite reports and kept operating. His results were unassailable. His crew worshipped him and feared him in equal measure. Silence, precision, absolute faith. If I say, dive, he told them, you breathe once and do it. If I say fire, pray later. On the night of October 24, 1944, Tang prowled the Formosa Strait, narrow water where mistakes bite back. The boat hadn't surfaced in 36 hours. Batteries sagged, air thinned. The motor's pulse and sonar pings were the only sounds. Then, contact. A heavy propeller beat. Too slow for a destroyer. Too deep for a transport, the sonar man whispered. Taka class, sir. She's close. A Takao-class cruiser wasn't just a ship. It was a floating city. 15,000 tons of armor. 8 8-in guns. Price tag $50 million. More than every building in O'Kane's hometown combined. One direct hit wouldn't sink her. 4 might, but Navy regulations cite otherwise. 2 per salvo always. O'Kane looked at the chart. Range 2200 wide. D target speed 20 knots. Bearing shift 2 degrees per 15 seconds. The angle was closing fast. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, then spoke so softly the crew almost didn't hear him. We're not following the book tonight. Sir. He didn't answer. He traced own line across the map, the projected path of the cruiser and another showing Tang's intercept. They crossed perfectly, a geometry of destruction that allowed no second try. For a man who lived by numbers, the choice was simple. The manual could save him, or the math could. He chose the math. He walked to the firing panel and said the words that rewrote his career, his fate, and the rule book of naval warfare. CTOL 4. Stand by. The man hesitated. He didn't repeat himself. Captain, whispered Ensign Brown, that's not authorized. O'Kane smiled faintly. Neither is dying. Ready tubes 1 through 4. The Tang turned toward its target. Every man aboard felt it. The tension of steel about to break the laws meant to protect it. Somewhere above them, the Japanese cruiser kept moving, unaware that the next few minutes would cost it everything. And deep below, the ocean waited to see which man's math would win. War had its own arithmetic, and Okane knew every digit by heart. A Taka-class cruiser displaced 15,000 tons. Armor belt 5 in thick, deck plating 2. Each of its 8-8-in guns could fire a 260-millimeter shell 20 miles. That meant each broadside weighed more than a car. It took 1,000 men to keep it alive and $50 million to build it. The USS Tang, by comparison, was a sliver of moving pressure. 301 ft long, 27 ft wide, 1/500 tons submerged. Her Mark 18 torpedoes were supposed to be perfect. 3,000 lb, 600 lb of Torpex warhead, range of 4,000 yards. But their guidance systems were temperamental. A single misaligned gyro angle, 1 degree off, and a torpedo could loop, stall, or circle back toward its own ship. It had happened before. The Navy called it circular run. Crews called it suicide by math. So when O'Conn ordered 4 tubes fired instead of 2, he wasn't just breaking regulation. He was multiplying risk by 4. He calculated the spread himself. Target speed 20 knots, range 2,200 WWII. Impact angle 90°, bearing drift minimal. His correction notes read 5° overlap to ensure saturation. 5 bond, that was the danger line, the point where safety ended and probability turned predatory. The manual said never to cross it. O'Kane crossed it anyway. He had a reason. The cruiser was zigzagging, a pattern designed to defeat American torpedoes. Each change in heading meant new firing data. By the time the fire control party finished recalculating, the enemy would be gone. O'Kane didn't believe in waiting for perfect solutions. He believed in fast ones. He told his crew once, not courage, but geometry, not hope, but timing. The Tang's fire control team knew what that meant. They were about to fight an equation. 4 torpedoes meant 4 chances for perfection or disaster. Each would take 40 seconds to travel the 2,000 WWII to target. At 46 knots, that was the longest 40 seconds of any man's life. The helmsman said quietly, "Captain, all tubes ready." O'Kane nodded. Fire 1. The boat trembled. Fire 2. The air hissed through steel. Fire 3. A heartbeat's pause. Fire 4. The last order echoed down the hull like a curse. On sonar, 4 pings appeared, 4 faint dots streaking toward destiny. The control room was silent except for the creak of metal and the hiss of oxygen vents. Men clenched fists, counted seconds under their breath. At 30 seconds, someone whispered, "They're running true." At 35, the first detonation. The shock waves slammed through the hull. Every dial quivered. A second explosion, brighter, deeper. The sonar man shouted, "Direct hit!" A third followed, sharper, tearing through the cruiser's stern. In the dim red light, sweat ran down O'Conn's neck. His hand hovered over the periscope controls. 3 hits out of 4. 90 seconds. 3 ships' worth of firepower gone. It was a statistical impossibility, and yet it was real. The men started to cheer, but O'Kane didn't move. He was still staring at the plotting board. Online, the 4th torpedo had vanished from the chart. No return echo, no explosion. The sonar man frowned. "Sir, the 4th's gone, bearing unknown." O'Kane said nothing. Then the faintest ping, not ahead, astern. He whispered, "Not gone, coming back." The crew froze. Everyone knew what that meant. The 4th fish had curved. At 46 knots, it was already halfway home. They had 40 seconds. O'Kane slammed his hand down. Hard left. "Dive to 200, the klaxon wailed. The Tang's bow tilted down, the deck shuddering. Men grabbed rails, eyes wide. The math that had made them legends was now coming to kill them. Not fear, but friction. Not fate, but a decimal too small to notice. And not the enemy's weapon, but their own precision turned backward. The perfect shot had become the perfect trap. The control room erupted in movement. Metal boots hammering steel, shouted bearings cutting through the alarm. The Tang's bow dropped, gauges trembling as the submarine dove hard. O'Kane gripped the periscope handles, watching the line of bubbles on the surface vanish above them. Passing 100 FT, someone yelled. Level at 200. The depth gauge spun. The deck groaned. Men held their breath. O'Kane's eyes never left the clock. He knew the torpedo's speed. 46 knots, 78 ft-pers. He didn't need sonar to tell him how long they had. 35 seconds. The fourth torpedo, the rogue one, was still somewhere out there, following a curve the Navy's geometry could predict, but not stop. The water was full of echoes, and every ping came back sharper, closer, faster. O'Kane's mind broke it into math. Turning radius 450 wide, contact time 38 seconds. Run distance 2,012. He whispered it like prayer. It's looping. God, it's looping. Helm left 20 he barked. The submarine groaned, turning sluggishly. Sweat rolled down the helmsman's cheek. Sir, it's coming right at us. Blow main ballast. O'Kane snapped. We surface or die. The Tang's air valves hissed open. The boat shuddered upward, fighting its own weight. The men clung to the rails, the hiss of air loud enough to drown out their hearts. 20 seconds. Sound bearing, O'Kane shouted. 340, closing fast. 15 seconds. The sonar man whispered, It's ours, sir. I can hear the motor. Same pattern. O'Kane shut his eyes. He'd trained his crew to fire faster than the manuals allowed, to overlap angles, to trust instinct over safety. Now that instinct had folded back on itself. 10 seconds, he ordered hard left. All ahead flank. The Tang lunged. The deck tilted. Men were thrown to the floor. 8 seconds. Depth 160. 7.135. 6. O'Kane shouted, Brace for the explosion, cut him off. A white flash tore through the aft compartment. The shockwaves slammed down the passageways, blowing out lights, twisting steel. The Tang convulsed like a living thing, her hull screaming. The men closest to Thestern never had time to shout. Fire, water, pressure. The three things submariners feared most all at once. The aft torpedo room was gone. The blast threw O'Kane forward into the control console. Blood filled his mouth. The boat rolled hard to port. Seal the bulkhead! Someone yelled, but the voice was already drowned by the roar of rushing water. Within seconds, the Tang began to die. The lights flickered, dimmed to red. Instruments spun uselessly. Air hissed from ruptured lines. The smell of oil and burning insulation filled every breath. Flooding aft compartments. Power loss. Emergency batteries down to 30%. Sir, she's not responding. O'Kane pulled himself upright. Blowbow tanks. Nothing happened. The air compressor was gone. He looked at the surviving faces around him. Men he'd trained to be machines now staring back with the wide, hollow eyes of shock. Get to the deck, he said. We're going up. The Tang was already tilting upward, her stern sinking fast, her bow punching toward the surface. She broke through a minute later, a black wound of steel and fire bursting from the sea. O'Kane was thrown clear. He hit the water hard, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. When he surfaced, the Tang was burning, half submerged, the aft section gone. Flames licked across the oil slick. He heard men shouting in the dark, then silence. He treaded water, chest heaving, staring at what was left of the ship that had been his precision instrument. The same torpedo that had destroyed a $50 million warship had come back to finish its creator. In the distance, faint over the hiss of burning fuel, O'Kane heard the echo of the Japanese cruiser breaking apart, explosions rolling across the horizon like thunder. He smiled through the salt and smoke. They're both gone, he muttered. Her and us, he floated in the black water, the glow of two dying ships lighting the sea around him. Not courage, but consequence. Not fate, but feedback. The math had come full circle. The sea was on fire. The Tang's wreckage drifted across the black water in long, glowing streaks, fuel burning slow and steady. The smell of oil mixed with the salt. Patches of flame hissed and died as they hit the waves, only Taurus again when the wind caught them. O'Kane clung to a piece of broken decking, blood running from his temple into the sea. He could barely hear over the ringing in his ears. Somewhere behind him, the submarine that had once been the most feared hunter in the Pacific was gone, broken in two, swallowed by the ocean she'd ruled. 9 men surfaced near him, coughing, bleeding, dazed. The rest were gone. 80 sailors trapped in steel 300 FT below. O'Kane's first words were barely a whisper. "Sound off. Who's alive?" No one answered. They were floating amid fire. The men tried to swim clear of the burning oil slick, but the current carried the flames with them. One shouted, "It's coming this way!" Another's voice cracked. "We're cooked out here, sir." O'Kane turned toward the wreck's glow, his voice hard now. "Swim toward the dark, follow the silence." They obeyed. Always had. Even here, stripped of orders and ship, they still followed him. They drifted until the fire dimmed behind them. The silence that replaced it was worse. O'Kane knew what would come next. The destroyers. The Japanese convoy they'd attacked wouldn't flee. It would come back for the kill. That was doctrine. That was math. He looked toward the horizon where faint lights shimmered like ghosts. Here they come? The first destroyer appeared minutes later, its spotlight sweeping the waves. "The men froze," O'Kane whispered. "Under now." They ducked beneath the surface, lungs burning, surfacing only when the destroyer passed overhead. Then came the depth charges. The sea convulsed. Walls of pressure hammered the survivors, crushing water into fists. One man screamed. Another never resurfaced. O'Kane surfaced between blasts, gasping, his voice ragged. "They're wasting shells," he said half to himself. "We're already dead." The irony wasn't lost on him. The best submarine commander in the U.S. Navy hunted not by the enemy he'd defied, but by his own creation. He remembered the numbers he'd written in his logbook before the patrol. Range 2200 WWII, spread 5 safety margin 0. He'd always believed precision could outsmart chance. That night, the ocean reminded him that numbers were merciless when you gave them no room to breathe. By dawn, the explosions had stopped. The destroyers were gone. The sea was calm again. 9 men drifted together, burned, silent, each gripping debris tossed alive. O'Kane stared at the horizon and muttered, "We knew better." One of the younger sailors, blood in his hair, asked, "Sir, what'll they say when they find out it was our torpedo?" O'Kane didn't look at him. "They'll call it malfunction," he said. "They won't call it what it was." "What was it, sir?" He wiped salt from his eyes. "A perfect shot with no mercy." That line became the only record of what really happened. The official Navy report listed Tang's loss as cause unknown. But O'Kane knew the cause. It was the equation he had solved one time too many. When rescue came, ironically, from the same Japanese destroyer that had hunted them, he didn't resist capture. He was too tired to argue with irony. Later in the interrogation camp, when a Japanese officer asked him, "How did you destroy our cruiser?" O'Kane said quietly, "I didn't destroy it. I just taught a torpedo to turn around." He never said more about it because there are 2 kinds of victory in war. The kind that kills your enemy, and the kind that kills everything else. For O'Kane, the math of destruction had balanced itself perfectly. Not defeat, not luck, just symmetry. Dawn broke gray over the South China Sea, and the survivors floated in silence. The oil slick around them stretched for miles, smooth as glass. The sea had swallowed both hunter and prey, and now it was still, too. Still, O'Kane blinked through salt and blood. His watch had stopped at 0327, the exact second the Tang died. He kept staring at it, unable to look away, as if time itself had decided to drown with them. 8 men drifted nearby, clinging to wreckage. No one spoke. The sound of burning metal had faded into a strange calm. Hours passed. A distant engine broke the horizon. Japanese patrol craft sweeping for survivors. The men froze. "They'll shoot us," someone whispered. O'Kane's voice was barely audible. "Not if they think we're theirs." He smeared oil across his face, then gestured to the others. Cover up. Stay low. The patrol boat came closer, cutting through debris. A spotlight swept across the water, pausing on each shape that floated there. Life jackets, fragments, bodies. It passed over them once, twice. Then it stopped. "Don't move," O'Kane hissed. The beam lingered, then swung away. The boat turned, engines rumbling, heading toward the wreckage where the cruiser had gone down. The Tang's men drifted on, alive by inches. By mid-morning, the sun began to burn the oil off the water, leaving behind a rainbow shimmer that stuck to their skin. The taste of it filled their mouths. O'Kane spotted a wooden crate drifting nearby, a supply box blown free from Tang's deck. Inside, a few ration tins, a flare pistol, and a half-melted compass. He passed the box around. "Take what you can. Don't waste a second. No one ate." The food smelled like gasoline. By the second night, the sea began to change. The waves rolled higher. Wind cut across the water like knives. One man began to hallucinate, said he could hear the Tang still beneath them, her engines turning slow, calling him home. He slipped under before anyone could grab him. O'Kane didn't look. "He's gone," he said flatly. "Keep your eyes on the stars." The next morning, a Japanese destroyer reappeared. The same one that had dropped depth charges hours before. The men braced, expecting the final round. Instead, a sailor on deck shouted something in Japanese, and a rope ladder dropped over the side. For a moment, none of them moved. Then Okani said, "Take it." As they were pulled aboard, Japanese sailors watched them with cold curiosity. Not hate, not pity, just confusion. These men had destroyed one of their warships. Yet here they were, skin burned black by oil, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking. They didn't look like victors. A Japanese officer stepped forward. "Name your vessel," he demanded. O'Kane answered, "Tang." The officer frowned, glancing at his clipboard. "Tang, impossible." "Tang destroyed cruiser." Same night. O'Kane's mouth twitched. "You're right." The officer didn't understand the joke. They were taken below deck, hands tied, water rationed. That night, through a thin iron grate, O'Kane saw the glow of the burning sea still flickering behind them. He realized then that no one in the Navy would ever know the truth. Not for years. 9 men had survived the perfect shot. They had sunk a $50 million cruiser and themselves in the same minute. The world above would call it heroism. The sea knew better. Not luck, but loss balanced like an equation. They called it Ofuna, the interrogation camp that didn't officially exist. A place where prisoners weren't registered, where questions were currency, and silence was a form of resistance. O'Kane arrived there weeks after the Tang's destruction, half-starved, half alive. His uniform was gone. His rank meant nothing. The guards didn't know who he was. Just another broken sailor, fished from the wreckage of his own making. They put him in a concrete cell with no windows for 3 days. No food, no words, only the sound of water dripping from a pipe overhead. Then came the interrogation. A Japanese officer in a clean white uniform sat across from him, hands folded. "You were commander," he said in accented English. "Your submarine tangenoded once. You destroyed Taka-class cruiser." "How?" O'Kane stared at the floor. "Luck." The officer frowned. "Luck does not destroy a ship of 15,000 tons." O'Kane's eyes lifted. "Neither does fear." The officer hit him across the face open-handed. "How many torpedoes?" 4. "That is forbidden." "Your Navy manual." O'Kane cut him off. "Manuals don't win wars." The officer studied him for a long moment. "You broke your own law." "Yes," O'Kane said. "And so did you." That earned him another blow. He didn't flinch. Days passed. The same questions, the same silence. His body weakened, but his focus didn't. He drew maps in the dust on the floor. Firing angles, spread arcs, probability diagrams. The guards thought he was going mad. The other prisoners knew better. One of them, a British pilot named Hale, watched him sketch. "What are you doing, Commander?" O'Kane didn't look up. "Finding out where Themath failed." "Does it matter now?" "It always matters," O'Kane said. A rule is only sacred until it kills you. At night, the guards would listen through the door as he muttered numbers to himself. Angles, seconds, distances, seconds, 46 knots, 2000 WWII, 500 overlap. The same litany that had built his legend and destroyed his ship. Months turned to seasons. When American bombers finally began to reach the Japanese mainland, the prisoners could hear the air raids in the distance, thunder that shook the walls. Hale asked him once, "What do you think when you hear that?" O'Kane said quietly, "That someone else is breaking rules better than we did." By the time Una was liberated in 1945, OK was barely recognizable. Skin gray, voice quiet, but eyes sharp. When allied officers asked him for his report, he didn't start with the attack. He started with the warning. The Navy says never fire more than 2 torpedoes per run. He said they're wrong. 2 don't work. 4 do until they don't. They stared at him, unsure if it was confession or doctrine. After his release, when journalists called him a hero, he corrected them. "I wasn't brave," he said. "I was impatient." His war was over, but his formula wasn't. He was the man who had proven that the line between genius and disaster was exactly 5 degrees wide. The Navy would later codify the very tactic he'd been condemned for: simultaneous full volley fire at close range. It became standard by the Cold War. The irony was complete. The Japanese guards at Una had called him the quiet madman. They were right. He wasn't mad for breaking rules. He was mad for trusting math to be merciful. In his later notes, O'Kane wrote one line that historians rarely quote: "When you perfect something long enough, it stops forgiving you." For him, it was never defiance. It was precision, carried 1 decimal too far. The war ended not with a bang for O'Kane, but with a clipboard. His name appeared on the official Navy list in late 1945. Survivor USS Tang SS-306, cause of loss undetermined. He smiled when he read it. The ocean had written the truth in fire, but the Navy preferred paperwork. Back in Pearl Harbor, the Tang's record spoke louder than any inquiry. 24 ships destroyed, 116,000 tons of enemy steel erased. The most successful patrol in submarine history, all accomplished in under a year. The Navy needed a hero, and O'Kane fit the shape of one. He was awarded the Medal of Honor. His citation reading, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, for sinking a major enemy warship through exceptional skill and courage." No mention of 4 torpedoes, no mention of illegal, just courage polished for ceremony. O'Kane stood at the podium that day, metal heavy on his neck, cameras clicking. He thanked his crew, his training, his country, but when reporters asked how he'd done it, he said only, "We followed the math." CT. What he didn't say was that the math had followed him back. Years later, declassified documents would quietly confirm what he already knew. The Tang had been destroyed by her own torpedo, a Mark 118 that turned 180 degrees after hitting a thermal layer. The Navy engineers called it a rare malfunction. O'Kane called it justice. He kept a notebook in his desk for the rest of his life. Inside were no stories, no victories, just numbers. 202 yards, 46 knots, 40 seconds. He wrote them over and over as if repetition could make them behave. When asked in an interview if he regretted breaking protocol, he said, "Rules keep you from dying until they keep you from winning." The reporter pressed him. "So you'd do it again?" O'Kane smiled faintly. Every time history books would file his name beside legends. Wahoo, Tang, Morton, O'Kane. The Navy would adopt his methods, refine them, teach them. His disobedience became doctrine. That was the final irony. The rule breaker became the rule. But O'Kane knew the price. He carried it like an echo that never faded. Every patrol manual printed after 1946 contained his principle under a new name: aggressive fire control procedure. What it didn't contain were the last words he spoke before the tang exploded. He'd whispered them softly, like an afterthought. "That's one of ours." He was right. The enemy hadn't taken him. His own precision had. Not recklessness, but exactness. Not fate, but consequence. Not bravery, but a man so meticulous that the sea could not distinguish genius from error. In the end, O'Kane's career became a closed loop. A calculation resolved so completely it circled back on itself. Tang rests now on the ocean floor, her hull twisted, her nameplate intact. Somewhere inside lies the lesson the Navy never recorded. Sometimes the path to victory runs straight through where the rules end. Years later, Richard O'Kane stood at Pearl Harbor, the Pacific calm before him. The memorial plaques shimmered in the sunlight, each name etched into metal, each a sound he could still hear with eyes closed. Near the bottom, in small, precise letters, was his submarine's name: USS Tang, SS 306, 80 men, one command, one perfect misstep. He reached out, brushing his hand across the engraved steel. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and oil, the same mixture that had filled his lungs that night. A young officer approached. "Sir, they say you fired 4 torpedoes that night." "All hits." O'Kane's lips curved faintly. 3 hits, he corrected. "The last one came home." The officer blinked, confused. O'Kane said nothing more. He didn't need to. Later, alone, he pulled a small notebook from his jacket, the same one he had carried on patrols. Inside, one line in his careful, cramped script: "Never perfect the weapon so far, it forgets its master." He closed it, slipped it back into his coat, and gazed across the open water. The harbor wind rippled the surface, and for a moment he imagined Tang's wake shimmering beneath it, a faint trace of geometry and loss. "She worked too well," he whispered. Behind him, the flag snapped sharply against its pole, one crisp, exact sound. O'Kane died years later in quiet obscurity, but his method endured. His firing pattern, once forbidden, once called madness, became the foundation of modern submarine tactics. Every Cold War captain who launched a torpedo spread did so guided by his equations. Every success carried a fragment of his miscalculation. He had said, "War is solved with seconds and steel." But the answer always demands the same price. Tang's story was that price, a perfect balance between brilliance and destruction. Not courage, but calculation. Not defiance, but design. Not heroism, but the silence that follows when the numbers stop moving. The sea kept both hunter and hunted locked on the same floor, 2 wrecks bound by the same trajectory. And somewhere beneath 4,000 feet of water rests O'Kane's final truth: perfection in war does not save you. It only finds you faster.